Hey guys, what's up? Tori here. So the topic of today's video is going to be maybe a slightly more serious topic, and the topic I'm just going to say straight up is how do people get that big? And by that big, I mean how do people get so obese that they're to a point where they need weight loss surgery, or they're pretty much bedridden, or have all these illnesses and are basically on death's door. Because I see that comment a lot, like on articles about obesity, on different videos on YouTube about obesity. Like, I see that comment all the time. Like, people are just like, I don't understand how you can let yourself get that big, and how a person can get that big, and how you can possibly eat that much without making yourself sick. And the first thing I'm going to say straight up is it's hard to fully understand it unless you have been through it yourself. And let me just tell you, like, any person that I watch, I do watch my 600 Pound Life, any of those people that I watch on that show, I can relate to in one way or another, because I understand. Like, other people go to them and they're just like, I don't understand how you can do this to yourself and get that big. Well, I do understand, because I've been through it. Like, it's something you just cannot understand unless you've been through it. You maybe have a slight idea if you're really, really close to someone who's been through it, but you still don't completely 100% understand it unless you've been through it yourself. And being someone that's been through it, I understand it. And the biggest thing that leads to people getting that big is they just flat out have a very unhealthy relationship with food, or even a food addiction. That's literally probably 99.9% of it. And a food addiction is no different than any other addiction. It's no different than having an alcohol addiction, a smoking addiction, a drug addiction, a shopping addiction, whatever kind of addiction it may be. An addiction to food is no different. People use those things to deal with hurt, pain, frustration. They use it as a stress relief, and it makes them feel good, and things like that. People use food the same way, and people that get that big, that's how they use food, whether it be because they dealt with some serious, trauma, like they dealt with a traumatic event in their life, or they are just under all kinds of stress due to things within the family, or within school, or work, or whatever. People just use food as a stress relief, and they're addicted to it. It tastes good. It makes you feel good when you're eating it. And usually the food that you're addicted to is not healthy. It's not your fruits and vegetables and protein. It's your carbs and your fats and sugars, because that's the food that you eat. And in the moment, it tastes so good and it makes you feel so good when you're eating it. But then later you have the regret. I mean, I think any person who's ever dealt with an alcohol or smoking or drug addiction, same thing. It feels good in the moment because it takes away that pain and makes you feel good while you're doing it. But then later you regret it because you're hungover or you feel like crap, whatever it is. Is the same thing with a food addiction. And what's harder about a food addiction is, with any other addiction, you can just go cold turkey and do a nice little 12-step program to completely 100% cut it out of your life. Well, you can't 100% cut food out of your life. You need food to survive. So that's where it makes it very difficult to stop an addiction to food. So another big thing is people use food as a comfort or coping mechanism to deal with emotions and pain and hurt. So, again, it just all goes back to that unhealthy relationship with food and an addiction to food. That's probably 99.9% of how people get that big. And I definitely know it is part of how I got that big. I personally would eat huge portions of food. I definitely had a huge problem with portion control. And also, I'm going to be real honest, I snuck food, I hoarded food, and I ate because it made me feel good anytime I needed it. And I mean, when I was younger, it was just things like I would pretend to go get a drink, and I would sneak some food out of the refrigerator while I was grabbing that drink to hide the sound of me grabbing the food with getting a drink out of the refrigerator. And then when I got older and was able to drive and spend money on my own, I would do things like go to the store and buy crap food and eat it in my car and then throw it away in the trash before I got in the house, or I would hide it in my bedroom somewhere. And I would literally use that just as a way to deal with my pain and hurt and emotions of whatever I was dealing with in life. And I had an addiction to food. It made me feel good, and I've now had to work really hard to battle that and to find different ways to cope with pain and hurting that isn't food, and to teach myself to just nourish my body with stuff that actually is good for me and will make me feel good, but make me tongue tie will make me feel good, but also keep me feeling good. Because the thing is, when you have food addiction and you're just eating the junky foods, you feel good for the moment, but then later you regret it because all you did was eat junk. Whereas if you're putting in good wholesome foods into your body, like, you feel good for a longer period of time because you're eating good, healthy, wholesome foods. And that's just something now that I've had to learn and I've had to battle, and that's part of why now I go to a counselor too, is I can talk with somebody about things I'm dealing with, and it's a much healthier way than just going to the snack cupboard and pulling out whatever junky snack I want. And that's part of another thing is there's not a lot of junky snacks in this house. There are a few for my dad and brother, but what I do the grocery shopping. So what I buy them for their snacks, like, I know it's snacks that they'll eat, but I really am not that tempted to eat. So, it's just, there's things that I've just had to learn along the way, and I know how I got that big. And when you're using food in that way too, like, your body, like, people just say, like, they never feel full, they don't know what full is, and that's true. They don't know what full is, because I didn't know what full was. I didn't really know what full truly felt like, and that's just because I never allowed my body and mind to really learn what full was, because I just would ignore it and quench my pain with the addiction of eating food. So, and if you ever watch my 600-pound life, pretty much every single one of Dr. Nalzaradon's patients, he recommends that they go to psychotherapy and see a therapist, because they have to learn to deal with past pain and dealing with pain and emotions and things that go on in life that isn't food. And it's because they all have an addiction with food and a very unhealthy relationship with food. And so you have to learn to have a much more healthy relationship with food, and how to deal with your pain and emotions in a way that isn't dealing with food. So yeah, that's how people get that big. So you maybe even would have a slight understanding of it too if you've dealt with it from a different addiction standpoint, because literally that's how someone allows themselves to get that big, is they just have an unhealthy relationship with food and an addiction that gets out of control and gets them to a point where they're on death's door, pretty much. Because I know that's where I was at, and I'm definitely in a much better place now. I'm definitely not perfect. I still work on it every day, work at it all the time, but I'm getting there. So that's what's important, and I'm just going to end it there. And I hope you find this inspirational, and that you on your own journey are able to develop a healthy relationship with food, and are able to learn to deal with stress in different ways that isn't food. And I hope to those of you that maybe aren't, you get a slight better understanding of how to understand a person in that standpoint. I hope you can understand how someone can get there, and it's not just because they're fat and lazy. It's not just because they're lazy and eat all the time and don't care. There's deeper underlying issues there that are invisible and that you don't see. There are people out there that are just in denial about it and they don't care, but that's just because they're in denial and they don't want to admit that they do have a problem that has to be dealt with. And that's, again, all part of the journey too, and they have to come to that in their own terms, if they ever do come to it. Some never do, and that's a sad thing, but it is what it is. So I hope that'll give you a little bit more of an understanding and help you on your own journeys. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. You can follow me on Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter. I'll leave those links in the description box. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.